When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Here's a bit of hurricane fact that many in North America lose sight of. The Atlantic Ocean doesn't only belong to the U.S. and Canada. Hurricanes will develop off Cape Verde in the African nation, move out across the ocean, through the Caribbean, to the Gulf, or up the U.S. Atlantic coast toward the Canadian Atlantic provinces. But this is not always the case. Some tropical storms will get caught and hook hard east, toward Europe. Hi, I'm Chris May, host of This Day in Weather History, a podcast from the Weather Network in Canada. Other anomalies include storms of this type affecting southern regions like Portugal, and especially Spain, being deeper inland. But nature does what nature wants, and she did again. This day in weather history. It was the 2005 Atlantic hurricane season, and what a season it was. Just weeks after Hurricane Katrina made international news by devastating forever the areas of New Orleans, Louisiana, and other parts of the southern United States, Hurricane Vince developed in the northeastern Atlantic basin. Yes, Vince. This was the first time the English alphabet was extinguished of names in the Atlantic hurricane season. That would not happen again until the bizarre and bonkers year known as 2020. The rarity of this hurricane was not just who it impacted, but the fact that it formed in these waters this deep into the fall. This is the North Atlantic, and Vince strengthened over waters thought to be too cold for tropical development. Vince was the 20th named tropical cyclone and 12th hurricane of the already extremely active season. Vince spun up from an extratropical system on October 8th, becoming a subtropical storm southeast of the Azores, Portugal. Okay, maybe that is not as cold and maybe not as unusual, but it was still mid-October and the waters around were turning over for the winter. Then, on October 11th, 2005, this day in weather history, the storm weakened slightly at sea upon its approach and next made an extremely rare landfall on the Iberian Peninsula as a tropical depression. The National Hurricane Center declared that Vince was the first tropical cyclone on record to have made landfall on the Iberian Peninsula. And the Spanish Center for Emergency Coordination issued a heavy rainfall warning for the province of Castellón with the anticipation of Hurricane Vince that would bring heavy flooding rain. The many fishing fleets and pleasure boats that line the Andalusian coast returned to port and weathered the storm on their moorings instead of risking it in open waters. This tropical depression, formerly known as Hurricane Vince, became the first tropical cyclone on record to make landfall in the country of Spain. Strange location, too, in that the Iberian Peninsula is a mountainous region shared by Spain and Portugal. Mountains are normally shoreline bouncers, like nightclubs, that will literally kick out any system like this just by their mere mass and height. The next time a storm would make landfall in Spain would not be until Alpha did it in 2020. Ironically, the only other year in history when storms had to dip into the Greek alphabet. And in both cases, although Spain was hit, it was weak and toward the end of the season, thankfully. What once was Vince dissipated over Spain, bringing much-needed rain to the region, actually, before its lingering remnants moved off into the Mediterranean Sea. But just how unusual was this occurrence? Okay, apparently, although Hurricane Vince developed in an unusual location in the northeastern Atlantic, well away from where tropical cyclones are usually found, it is actually not the northernmost forming, and it is not the easternmost forming Atlantic tropical cyclone. There are two storms that hold these records: an unnamed tropical storm in 1952 and, as mentioned earlier, Alpha in 2020. Now a footnote just before we wrap this episode. When subtropical storm Vince formed on the 8th of October, it was the first time in recorded history that a 21st tropical or subtropical storm had ever developed within a single Atlantic hurricane season, surpassing the 20 storms of 1933. Hurricane Vince was also the first named V storm in the Atlantic since naming began in 1950. It would be 15 years until we would see another V-named storm, and that would be Tropical Storm Vicky in 2020. That same season, Tropical Storm Wilfred bested Vince as the earliest 21st named storm in a season, doing it 20 days earlier. And then as it goes, after Wilfred came Alpha, and that landed in Spain. Funny how things work out, huh? Especially this day in weather history. Tomorrow is October 12th, and we will look back at the Columbus Day storm of 1962, also known as the Big Blow, and originally called Typhoon Frida. This struck the west coast of Canada and the Pacific Northwest coast of the United States. Before I get to it, we have upped our visual game and revised the looks of our video pod shorts. Now they are shot right here at my TDIWH studio while I'm actually recording the episode you're listening to. They're short, easy to digest, 1 to 2 minute bits that are loaded with archived photo and video right from that day in weather history. Now they're on TV and online at www.theweathernetwork.com, but then you go /weather history. Takes you right to the page. And tomorrow we hit up the Columbus Day storm that happened on October 12th of 1962. This day in weather history. With me, your host, Chris May.